You can't start the car. Johnny has the keys.
Hello, 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 and welcome out there in podcast land. You have reached a little ditty on Facebook or through your podcast streaming of choice we call Johnny Has the Keys. It's a podcast. Well, look at me. It's a podcast where Tim and I get together, two old friends, and we talk about horror and science fiction, key elements of a film, a television, or a, yes, you're webcasting all over us. And we talk about key elements of those things that they influenced or were influenced by them. We've been doing it for a few years now. So if you are new to us and haven't found us, thank you. And we're glad you found us. Give us a good review, we hope, if you enjoy it. Give us a good review, even if you don't enjoy it, because we appreciate that. Subscribe if you're on the YouTube channel or all those good things that help us keep doing this. Like I said, we've been doing it for 4 years now, and hopefully it's been we're garnering some fandom. Tim, how are you? What have you been doing?
Oh my goodness, I am fine. What have I been doing? I have been watching a slew of movies lately, some good, some bad. And last week I had the teaser of having been watching some of those movies I usually can't stand. Found footage type movies.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we were talking about those. Yep.
There's a couple that have been on my radar because of high ratings on Rotten Tomatoes. And I decided,
there you go.
Oh, yeah, I know. I'll give them a whirl. And I have to say, I wasn't terribly disappointed. I watched these two, Creep and the sequel, which gets even higher ratings, Creep 2.
Ooh. Oh, the titles alone are just amazing. Yes.
Amazing. These movies, it's the kind of movie when you watch it, it's like, oh my God, we could have made this. This didn't cost them a dime, with the exception of maybe one or two special effects, very little special effects at all. We could have
filmed in like Spanky's barn, and they used,
or
lights without
lamp.
lamp. Yeah,
exactly. And the main thing going for these two is the lead character, the actor. And I'm sure he's probably a community theater actor somewhere. I don't know. He's pretty good. I'm sure he's probably doing other stuff now because these movies have garnered some attention. His modus operandi is he's hiring a videographer to document his last months before his unborn child arrives because he's dying. Basically that old Michael Keaton movie. You remember that movie?
Oh, yeah.
Except this is the horror version.
The horror version.
He doesn't have a wife or a kid. He's basically just getting people to come to his house and film him so that he can kill them.
Oh, okay.
So that's a little bit of a spoiler. I don't think I'm giving away too much though, because I think most smart horror movie people will figure it out pretty quick.
Yeah, probably.
But he's a Looney Tune, and that's where the joy comes in watching these, is because he is fucking crazy.
Okay.
He will jump out in front of you with a giant werewolf mask on just to scare you. He's constantly jumping out to scare you. So there's jump scares in this movie all the time, but they're like legitimate jump scares where he's just trying to scare you.
Okay. Interesting. So is it a psychological or just a jump scare throw? I mean, is he like a Hannibal Lecter-y kind of creepy, like the title?
I would say it's psychological, but he's not like a cannibal or anything. He is just a sociopath. And he likes to let you know what he's going to do sometimes. And like, should I keep this guy? Maybe I should run. But if I run, will he kill me now? That kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay.
I would definitely recommend them. I don't know if I would do them for the podcast. I vet a lot of these for the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not sure I would pick these, but I did have fun watching them, even though it was found footage. There wasn't a lot of shaky camera or anything. So.
Well, over the weekend and everything, you had suggested Cam to me, and I wanted to catch it, but I haven't. So it's going to be on my list for hopefully this weekend, and I'll try to catch it before next week.
If you do, we'll just do that together as our weekend, our genre week. Yeah.
My schedule has been so hectic that I haven't really been able to really sit down with a lot of time to watch anything. So I've started reading a little bit in my spare time because I can bounce back and forth with the iPad. So I'm rereading Wheel of Time because, the series came out last year and got horrible fandom reviews, but okay reviews enough for it to be picked up for a second season. But I'm really going to reread it so I can, because I haven't watched the series yet, but it's really divided the fandom. Some of them are saying, you got to accept it. It's kind of like The Shining. The book is not going to be the TV series. But other people are like, no, they're changing huge aspects of this mythology. And you can't do that with this story. That's not what he wanted. And I think I mentioned it in a podcast earlier, when it first came out a few months ago or whatever, because it's a great series of books. It's
you
long.
Told me it's like 11 books or something.
It's 16.
Ooh,
16. Yeah. Now,
a lot.
About 4 of those you could do without. It's basically, 4 of them don't have very little plot movement as far as the overall arcing story go. Good character work, but it's kind of like, oh, I don't want to follow you on your Christmas vacation, or your summer vacation thing, sort of stuff. So not majorly plot reveals, but the story is really cool. I like it better than the Tolkien series. I like it better than Lord of the Rings. I like it better than The Hobbit. It's hugely dense with story and history and magic and fantasy and all of this. It's just really cool. And it's also very topical right now from as we talked about, non-binary, gender, the power of the genders, the mixing of the genders, pronouns, all of that stuff is very, very important, because the basic thrust of it is the world in this fantasy land is controlled basically by matriarchy. Almost every city, every castle, every whatever has a female in charge of it.
A queen
and
or whatever.
A lot of it has to do with the fact that women can embrace what they call the one power. And the one power is it's the force, essentially. It's basically what it is, except it's also the magic from Harry Potter. It's everything. They can, make force beams, they can create life, they can do all these things, right, with it. Men used to be able to do it, but something happened 1,000 years ago that, quote, broke the world. And since then, every man that tries to tap into their own one power goes mad. And so the females have to gentle them and have to keep them repressed and under control. And it's all about, the whole story is this huge mythology about in centuries past, both the genders, the female and the male, blended their one powers together, and it made this incredible force of nature. But now they're separate, and it's about, should they get back together? Should they not? Is it whatever? So it's a really cool.
If the men are going to go crazy, yeah.
Right. Well, and of course, the whole thing is the hero journey. So you're following this prophecy that says that a man will be born who can channel the one power and do it successfully, and he will be called the Dragon Reborn. That's the whole mythos of the story. But it's got so much more to it. That's just a simple thread that goes through it. It's so well written. Sanderson, who wrote it, no, Sanderson didn't write it. The other guy wrote it. Sanderson finished it because he died before the last 2 novels. And his apprentice, essentially, his writing assistant, finished the last 2 novels of the series. So,
well, I'm a little curious and terrified to know what gentle means, because I might want to be gentled.
Well, gentle means they remove the ability to channel, or to touch the one force, the one power. Yeah,
I've never heard of that. Terminology. It sounds.
Yeah. It's essentially
gelding. Like it could be
gelding.
provocative, or it could be
Yeah,
emasculating.
Right. Literally emasculating sort of thing. Right.
Yeah.
And it's great. It has, I mean, I'm just literally giving you one spoke of the wheel of time. There are 100 and all these great details that come from it. It's kind of like, Tolkien's about a kid who has to throw a ring into a fire. Oh, there's a lot more to it than that. That's what Wheel of Time is like. And it's a great series of novels, but it's really dividing. No, I'm not watched it, and it's really dividing the fandom. So I'm curious to reread it again before I dive, at least read the first 2 books, because supposedly the first season of this is the first 2 books. So kind of like they did The Expanse. The Expanse was like a book or a book and a half each season. So I'm curious to see it. But because it's all about, intertwining these 2 forces of nature, and can you do it or can you not do it? If you do it, is it bad? If you do it, it's good, that sort of thing. So,
well, speaking of genders and opposing genders.
Oh, and entwining.
Genders. I guess that's a good segue to our topic of the day.
Yes.
We are in my world. Although you may challenge me again on this and whether or not it's exactly a horror movie or not. It does fall more into horror than it does science fiction. We are doing 1972's Brian De Palma film, Sisters.
Sisters. No.
Yeah, there you go.
Not that one, but
this is our second venture into the land of Brian De Palma this season. We also went a few years ahead, 4 years exactly, 76, with Carrie a few weeks ago. De Palma is, we mentioned in that episode, is known more for suspense. Ironically, because I watched that documentary you recommended, and I read something on how he started off actually doing comedy, but then
improv comedy. Yeah.
Got on quickly to doing suspense and became an Alfred Hitchcock auteur or mimicker, or however you want to put that.
Copycat. Yeah. Whatever.
Yeah. And I don't mind it. I still really enjoy his films. And this one is low budget and often horribly acted, but I still love this movie. I've been watching this movie for decades now, happen to own it. And it is about, it starts off in a kind of candid camera type environment where it looks like a guy is about to witness a blind woman take her clothes off. And then you realize it's a television show and they're all guessing whether or not he's going to watch her do it or leave the room or whatever. It turns out she is a model that was hired to do this scenario on television. And he, I don't know, wins a door prize or something. And they end up to eat after the show. She invites him home.
What? At the African room. That's the one that man.
Yeah, there's a lot of racial insensitivity. I don't know if that's even the right word. Insensitivity. I don't know. We'll get to that. Anyway, they give him his prize is a dinner at the African room, which sounds like, hey, you're black, you should eat here. It's not. Right. It's not a good look. And they end up hitting it off. She's French Canadian. She has an accent. They go to her apartment. They get it on. And then the next morning, as he's leaving, she doesn't want him to leave. She says it's her birthday. He overhears her in the bathroom talking with somebody. And she says it's her twin sister.
Who's come to visit. Yes.
Was that it? Or did he maybe think she was on the phone? I couldn't remember.
No, she said, it's my sister. She came to visit because it's our birthday.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, she says because it's our birthday.
Because it's their birthday. Her name is Dominique.
Yes.
So she has a bit of some kind of panic attack where she needs these pills. She takes two and sends him to the pharmacy to get some more. He decides to pick up a birthday cake, has her name and Dominique's put on it because he's a sweet guy. And when he gets back and brings her the cake, she's asleep on the bed, and he turns the cake ever so gently towards her with the giant butcher knife.
Yeah, the largest knife, the cake cutting knife in the history of the world.
Sticking out of it. And she wakes up and looks transformed somewhat and a little bit scary, grabs the knife and plunges it into his crotch, which still makes me jump every time I see it.
And then his mouth.
Yeah, she stabs him in the mouth too.
Yeah.
She brutally stabs this guy to death. And it is a shocker right out of Psycho because it happens very early on in the movie.
Yes.
And he is like, I guess what you would consider a lead character up until that point. This murder is witnessed via split screen by a neighbor across the street, which is very Rear Window, another Hitchcock movie. There's Hitchcock keys out the wazoo. And she sees it. So she calls the police and wants to go investigate because she's a reporter. Meanwhile, Danielle, I'm skipping over stuff. I neglected to mention she has a quote ex-husband that comes. Well, he kind of intrudes on her date, but then he gets sent away anyway. He ends up coming to help her cover up this murder and to make sure she gets away with it. While they're cleaning up the apartment, the reporter is getting the cops together to come investigate. They get the body out with a really hilarious trip fall that still makes me laugh.
Oh my God.
Slip fall.
My notes actually have, damn, Emil, that's a hell of a fall, buddy.
It's hilarious. Anyway, just in time, they get the body into a sofa bed and clean up all the blood. So the cops arrive. Emil has taken away all the cleaning stuff and the murder weapon, but the body is still on the couch, and there's a blood smear on the back of the couch that they're carefully teasing us with suspensefully. Will the policeman see that blood stain?
Again, very Hitchcock. Show us something, show us the audience something that the characters don't know.
So Hitchcock. And then one of my other favorite moments is that while they're looking around, the other woman, the reporter, is snooping. She finds the birthday cake with the two names on it, comes running out and drops it. Here, look, it's two people. No, and she drops it. Anyway, I have been going on way too long with this synopsis. How would you encapsulate the rest of the film?
The rest of it, well, basically, then it proceeds into almost like a procedural. It's the reporter. It's the reporter who cried wolf. The reporter that nobody will believe, not even her own mother, trying to convince people that she witnessed this murder, that this man's body is somewhere, and this woman is obviously crazy and is trying to kill people. It ends up with her hiring a private detective. They think they know where the body is because
they see the couch is being moved by some movers.
Well, he actually helps move it because he was in the room when they all came in, acting like a window cleaner. But so they kind of diverge into different paths. He goes following the sofa to see where it's going to be and if he can get to the body. She follows the notes he found, which is a file from a psychiatric institute about the twins and the whole backstory. And she ends up at a mental institution with the climactic scene between her, Dr. Emil, and Danielle. And we have the big surprise twist reveal, which we all knew about 30 minutes ago, sort of thing. But it does kind of have then a little bitty psycho-y twist at the end kind of thing with what happens to our protagonist.
Yeah,
because
she gets away in the little curtain call down the staircase as everyone comes out of the building. Right. And then, we find out our real protagonist, the reporter, has been hypnotized by the doctor and brainwashed, essentially. So there was no murder because there wasn't a body.
There was no murder because there was no body.
Yeah, because the doctor, before Danielle ends up killing him, the doctor hypnotizes her and makes her, at one point, there's this really weird dream sequence that's right out of a Ken Russell movie where
I have that in my notes.
Yeah, I did too. Yeah, I figured we both would. Where she feels like she is the sister and they're in bed next to each other.
I mean,
their courtship and the murder of Dominique, the twin.
Yeah.
It's
so
a
the basic
fucked up
backstory. So the basic backstory is Dominique was jealous that Danielle got pregnant by her own doctor. She killed the baby. The doctor separated them. Danielle died on the table. But Dominique has this psychological scarring that anytime she gets close to anybody or makes love with anybody, Dominique comes out.
Yeah, I was going to say, you've got the names backwards. Danielle's
good. Dominique's bad. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's the big flip twist at the end.
And basically what it is Danielle manifests Dominique's personality under duress, I guess, of some kind,
or arousal
maybe,
under emotional commitment. It's kind of played off of that old thing about, twins being jealous of each other, twins not respecting each other because you're doing this to me, even though you're not, sort of thing. This is, can I ask, this was before Carrie, right?
It was 4 years before. It came out in 1972.
So I can see this as a De Palma evolution transition from what he had been doing in the past, which was basically these kind of, I guess, comedies, improv, a found footage video. That's what he was doing, were these little documentaries that were more comedic. And that's what kind of throws me off of this. I kept watching. It's kind of like when you watched it last week, you text me and you said, there's parts of this I love and parts of this I really don't like.
Oh, it's glorious and horrible all at the same time.
Right. And I feel the same way. And it's mostly tonal shifts that bother me about it. And I kept thinking all the way through, man, I'm not a big remake guy. But it would be really cool if, like, Ken Russell had made this. That would be really trippy to see how he'd take this script and what he'd do with it. If maybe David Lynch did this.
It looks like a David Lynch movie to me.
Very much.
Yeah.
I've got that as one of my biggest keys is this is a very Lynchian sort of thing, but it actually has more of a progressive story than Lynch usually does.
It does.
Think of Mulholland Drive, which is another dual female sort of story that's done with Lynchian kind of the way he does it. But it's the comedic tones that throw me off in this, that I can't build the horror enough because now you've suddenly thrown a joke in there.
I wouldn't take a damn thing for those scenes. I love them, man. Both of them. I think they're hilarious. They make me laugh so hard. When he falls, that looks like a real fall. He hits hard.
Does, and he lays there for much longer than you're going, get up, dude.
Yeah, and then her doing the cake, when she comes running out with that cake and loses it and it flops over upside down, that makes me laugh too.
Well, then later on with the lady and the everything has to be clean at the asylum, and she's got great. And before that, you've got the Charles Durning character going, look, I went to private eye school 101 or whatever. You didn't go to school for this.
The whole premise of comedy is set up with it being set on Staten Island.
Yeah. Where
Staten Island?
What?
Yeah, that's pretty funny too. And I loved the guy outside. Well, this reminded me, and I should put this in my keys because I forgot to, of that movie Alone in the Dark that takes place in the mental asylum with Martin Landau, when she's like out on the porch looking to get
the gardener guy,
and there's a gardener out there in the middle of the night trimming the hedges.
Trimming the hedges at 10 o'clock at night.
Just like,
sure,
can I use your phone? And he's like, sure, it's down the hall.
Yeah, and I would have loved, to me that was a plant, and I would have loved like a payoff later on, like when she's being taken to the hypnosis room of seeing that guy, like in his room with his clippers. just
Or
sitting there
something,
clipping
yeah,
because
or
I
out
really
the
thought
window.
he's a patient. He's not a freaking gardener at 10 o'clock
No,
at
no
night.
one's out there trimming
What?
the hedges at midnight or whatever. That was
Oh,
hilarious.
wait, you just gave me a key though. That's like Us, where the not Us, No Way Out. No, is it No Way Out? No, what's the
Get Out.
Get Out? With the garden, with the handyman running at night in the yard and everything.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about
Yeah.
that. I need to put down.
Get Out should be in there. Yeah. Well, what's your take on it? I mean, you said you love it. Overall, you love it.
It's there's several reasons I love the movie. First and foremost, it's Brian De Palma and it's early De Palma, so I can appreciate it for what it is. It's also nostalgic in that it was one of those VHSs I own that we probably watched at my house late at night several times. I'm sure.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I like Charles Durning. It was before Margot Kidder had her problems, because I think we've talked before about her. She had bipolar disorder, and she kind of went off.
I think it was misdiagnosed too for a long time.
It may have been. And then she kind of dipped into drugs or alcoholism or both with it. And then she resurfaced, from what I understand, and was doing well in the end when she was like making appearances on Smallville and television shows in relation to her playing Lois Lane on Superman. And then she killed herself. And they ruled that it was suicide. It wasn't accidental. So, so it's kind of sad, but I do like watching her because she is a great actress. And for those of you that don't know, I've mentioned it before, she's in Black Christmas, that great Bob Clark slasher movie. Yep. So she's in that as well. And it came out like the same year.
Both the females in this are really good. From an acting perspective, yes. Margo Kidder and the girl that plays Grace are both good, despite what the girl that plays Grace has to say. A lot of her dialogue I don't really like.
It's horrible. Some of her scripting is just the pits. Yeah.
But she's playing it for all it's worth and giving it all the conviction and everything else, even though she says, well, sometimes cops are bad.
Yeah.
What? But so I like both of them. I like the guy that played the guy at the very beginning. I thought he was really good.
Philip.
Emile, not so much. I'm not a big fan of Emile.
I think he's kind of funny.
Okay. Even in his very first scene, they're panning the audience at this candid camera show. There's one guy on the front row who's reading a book instead of clapping. And you're going, oh, and he's wearing big goofy glasses and a beret. You kind of go, okay, don't look at him. Oh, obviously.
Did you watch that documentary that you recommended to me?
No.
Oh my gosh, you have to watch it. It's on YouTube. He's in it. He's interviewed in it.
Oh, okay.
And he's like, he said, well, what are you? They asked him, what would you do to make a character seem that suspicious? And so, he was kind of directed to play it that way. Anyway.
Well, yeah. I guess. It's just the tonal shifts throw me off. The script, I think, needed, again, I feel like it needed like a second or third draft more, because I think you could have really played up that ending and made it super creepy, twisty. So by the end of it, we either don't know who's who, who's what, where, when,
or whether or not Dominique is alive.
Right. Or whether or not Dominique really was separated. And that's what Emile is hiding. He's actually the Looney Tune who's wanting to, take Danielle away and all this. And Dominique actually is real. But, it is what it is. They did what they did. I think it was probably very effective for the time. It has a lot of Hitchcock influence. It has a lot of De Palma influence, though. He took a lot from this. One of my biggest keys is this was his training ground student film. This is where he learned pacing, control, what works, what doesn't, how to play. Split screens with special effects.
The split screen works in this. I kind of like it.
I love it. And I love the timing of it. The fact that you're not just seeing two POV. Like he starts it by seeing two POVs of the same thing. So you're in the room with the guy's hand coming up, but you're also her watching the guy's hand coming up. Mm-hmm. But then suddenly they diverge and they're both doing their own thing. in different areas of the
Yeah,
building
she's
and
talking to
everywhere.
the police and they're cleaning up. Yeah.
But your suspense is building and building because the timing is getting closer.
Oh my God, it is. It's that whole thing we've talked about time and time again about Alfred Hitchcock saying, it's much more suspenseful if you know there's a bomb under the table ticking
Yes.
and people are talking about baseball than it is if it just blows up out of the blue.
Right. If we in the audience are ahead of the characters, more suspenseful. Because we know what's coming. We know,
and that they're downstairs in the lobby when he hits the floor.
Yes,
trying to get out the door.
And you're going, get up, get up, get up, get up. They're coming up the stairs.
They're coming up the stairs. Yes, yes. Great stuff.
Again, what I thought was odd was then why not revisit that at the end? When you have these different points of view. You got Emile, I want you back as my wife. You've got her, Dominique is going to take care of me. And you got Olivia going, what the hell is going on? You could have really played. And I think that's what he learned. He learned, okay, in Carrie, I'm going to save it for the end. I'm not going to show it up front, even though I could. I'm going to save that split screen stuff for the end where it's powerful. Kind of thing.
Before we get into casting and stuff, you mentioned De Palma and this being sort of a student film for him. Another thing that I discovered that I did not know when I watched that documentary is that apparently Grace Collier, what's her name? The actress that played Grace, Jennifer Salt, and Margo Kidder were roommates. And apparently directors, I don't know why, but directors of the 70s used to always be at their house. And that's how he knew them. They were all friends and came together to make this movie. And he said it was not uncommon for other big directors of the 70s to be there. Like, I don't know, Schlesinger or Scorsese or somebody, that was doing those gritty movies that we always refer to as great 70s movies or whatever.
Yeah, well, so and this was the year for that.
Right. So this was a little click that was going on. I don't know if you know this, but Jennifer Salt quit acting shortly after. I mean, she didn't do a lot of acting. She became a huge producer, and she is still producing stuff with, guess who? Ryan Murphy. She's doing Ratchet and American Horror Story and all this.
Really?
Shit. Yes.
Okay. That's a big cast key. I didn't know.
Yeah, totally blew my mind when I found out about it. I was like, she's an okay actress. It's a terrible script. And her haircut and her wardrobe is awful.
Oh, bad. Bad.
She went on to still be a major player in Hollywood behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And then Margo Kidder, of course, went on to stardom just a few, 4 years later in Superman.
Yeah. And deserved so. She was great in this, especially, you could, as little as she was given script wise, you could tell the difference between Danielle and Dominique instantly almost.
It was a very method thing where she was like tucking her tongue down in her cheek and it made her cheek come out a little bit.
Yeah.
She was her brow would go down. Yeah. It was very, I don't know, Brando-esque or whatever.
Yeah,
it was,
I could see that. Yeah.
Yeah. Back to the script, though, you have Brian De Palma to thank for that because he wrote it.
Yeah. I have him and a girl named Louise Rose.
Louisa Rose.
And the fact that he originally got the idea from a Life magazine article?
He got it from an article on Real Siamese Twins, a story that he read, and he talks about that in that documentary you recommended. And Louisa, I guess, was a friend of his that also wrote Phantom of the Paradise, which is another very strange movie.
Well, and ironically, I found this out as a kind of a weird key out of this. She wrote it. Lynn Pressman is listed as an executive producer on this. And that's Pressman's son, I'm assuming, because he went on to produce Phantom of the Paradise.
Oh, okay.
So I'm assuming that's his son. He gave him a credit in this, showed him how to do Edward. Because Edward went on to do a bunch. I mean, he did American Psycho, Wall Street, The Crow, did a bunch of stuff, the producer of this. Okay. So it was interesting that they worked together on Phantom of the Paradise, which is another one that goes, whew, Boy, you derailed really quickly on that script, didn't you?
Yeah, that's a very strange movie. A lot of people love that movie, and I was never a big fan of it.
No, I wasn't either.
But I was trying to just figure out who wrote what. It says Brian De Palma did the screenplay and the story, but it says Louisa did the screenplay. So I wonder if he just said, "Hey, here's the story. Write this," and she did the screenplay.
I got the impression that it was a little bit collaborative in the fact that she's doing all the words. He's basically doing the storyline, and saying, no, I want her to be the one that's actually crazy at the end. And, and I want to make sure that everybody dies by getting their crotches cut or stabbed by something, because both guys do.
Both guys do.
Both guys. It is a feminine and power movie,
in a way, and then in other ways it's so not, especially what you were saying with the African American stuff, and that I
love the fact though that even in 73 when they did that, the guy just kind of shakes his
rolls
head
his eyes
and rolls his eyes. It's just like, really, dudes?
Yeah,
really?
You're giving me a gift that's to the African room.
Yeah, I don't.
It was just
I don't get the trip to Guadalajara or something. I got to go to. Yeah.
And then you've got Grace, who is trying to be Miss, women's liber hotshot reporter, and she keeps getting pushed down by others too.
Everybody,
including the private eye she hires, Charles Durning.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Nobody takes her realistically this entire movie. It is even the ladies at the cake shop make fun of her. I mean, she doesn't get a break anywhere in this. Nobody supports her, which is, if you're trying to establish a strong female character, there's a lot of misogyny, filtering through all this. If you're trying to do that.
That being said, it is the rare slasher movie where the killer is a female. That doesn't happen that often.
Well,
and it's not the first. Well, it is the first time maybe that De Palma did it, but it's not the only time he did it, because he kind of did it in Dressed to Kill too, even though the murderer ended up being Michael Caine. He was dressed as a female.
Right. Body Double has kind of the cross-dressed killer in one scene, and so he likes that as a De Palma-ism through a lot of his stuff.
I'm not just Hitchcock. I can do me too.
I can be me too. We're going to do a cross-focus lens on just the knife. I love to show blades in my movies, which he does in a lot of them.
There's so many parts of this movie. I mean, you've seen this movie probably as many times as I have, where I still cringe. And I mean, not just when you see that knife stab him in the crotch, but when he's holding the cake with the handle of the knife extended to her.
I know,
You're
like here,
what are you doing?
Stab me in the mouth with this, would you please? Yeah,
stop.
Just did not. No.
Yeah, it's very. I don't know. I can't think of a movie that makes me think of a knife that way other than Halloween. Big knives and Halloween, and big knives and sisters.
Yes. And big, I mean, we're talking big knives. We are talking, even when she has the weird, distorted, Ken Russell dream of the separation, it's like with a huge chopping butcher knife.
It's a meat cleaver. It's a giant meat cleaver. And I love it when they show, that's a very David Lynch thing, when they show everybody in the audience passing the meat cleaver down to him.
And they're all twins.
Yeah, and they're all people from the movie.
Yes.
I think the private investigator's there, isn't he?
Yes.
Everybody's there.
Yeah.
Maybe, I bet you if you look close, you'd find the cake decorator there too.
Well, I had a weird thing. I don't know if it's a key or if it's a manifestation of a key, or if it was totally unintentional, I know, at this time, but watching the movie, she's had dinner with him and they're kind of developing their romance. Would you like to come back to my room with me, sort of thing, because I'm a French girl, but
I'm very sexy.
I'm very sexy, listen to my voice. But it has that kind of, her head on his shoulder, and they're looking across the bay from Staten Island at the Twin Towers.
Oh, yeah.
And I immediately typed, are the Twin Towers always going to stun us? When we see them in movies, are we always going to go, oh, yeah. And then I suddenly went, the Twin Towers. Twins. Duh. Yeah. But he didn't. think he meant that, or he might have, because they were called the Twin
it was the
Towers.
New York skyline. Then you couldn't really help it. But I agree with you about that. Every time I see an old movie with the Twin Towers in it, it does stun me.
There's always that moment of ooh, boom. I mean, it comes back every time we see it.
I think it'll happen for the rest of this generation for sure, our generation, and maybe the one preceding. But I mean, eventually it won't, because eventually it'll be so old that people weren't alive when it happened.
Right.
Yeah.
He leaned down and kissed her, and I wrote in my notes, "Ooh, French kissing! Look." Hey, come on, that was clever.
It was clever, and you're talking about bad comedy, so.
That's true. Yeah, you're the one talking about comedy, Horton.
Another character in this movie that we've neglected to mention is that Brian De Palma actually scored Bernard Herrmann to do the music.
He did, although boy howdy is it over the top. But
it is way, way over the top. And while I was watching it, all I could think about was what you said in Carrie. When something scary happens, they would cue that crazy and I was like, he's doing that in this movie too. It is 4 years earlier. Well,
but this one hits you even at the very begining with the credits. I mean, those credits are loud and bombastic, and that theme is huge. I am killing you now. Yeah, it's just so.
The music is way over the top.
Now, it did work, I think, in one place, but I wanted to look it up because I didn't have enough time research-wise. But I wanted to look it up because I thought it was a cheat. When she is doing the following and driving and following and everything, the music sounds suspiciously like the driving music in Psycho.
Okay.
I mean that dun 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 dun.
Yeah.
And I was going, okay, that's at least the same orchestration. It may not be the same melody, but he's doing a lot of his old shtick.
Well, and other than the main theme being so dramatic, there's a lot of the music I like. And we never did really talk about scenes before we kind of jumped into it. But one of my favorite scenes is the juxtaposition of her decorating the cake and Danielle squirming on the floor because she needs her meds. And it just keeps cutting to that little hand going really slow, and that music, that really light, fluffy music. Da, 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 and then she's on the floor just curled up into a ball, like in pain.
Yep.
Love that.
That's a good one.
It's so annoying because they keep cutting to her doing the icing on that cake, and she's inexperienced at it, and she's having to spell out these really long names.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of which, I'm sure you recognized one of the cake people was Olympia Dukakis.
Yes.
Yeah, she had a couple lines in there.
And I think she was in the dream sequence too.
She may have been.
She was in the dream sequence. And while we're talking cast, the dude that plays the detective, the cop that comes, I think he's that character in everything he ever played. He is that detective.
I don't know if I put his name. Oh yeah, his name is Dolph Sweet, and he played Detective Kelly. And ironically enough, he and Charles Durning were both in the same role on Another World. They both played the same character.
Probably not at the same time, we'd think, right?
No, because you know how soap operas are. They'd kill. Yeah. People would leave and then somebody would replace them. But I just thought it was funny because they look and remind me of each other a lot.
Yeah.
And those kind of roles. I saw that guy that played Detective Kelly in God knows how many television shows back in the 70s and 80s, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I've got in my notes, this is a procedural on why you do not take the eyewitness to the scene of the crime with you. Just don't do it, because they will snoop around and get hysterical and just.
Oh, she was driving me crazy.
I was going, shut up.
Oh, and I loved it when she just walked into the bathroom and said, I'll be just a minute, and then shut the door. I'm like, well, bitch, you didn't even ask her if you could use her bathroom.
Right.
You just go in there.
Yeah, it was well, because she knows she's a murderer. She saw it all,
with her shag haircut and her floor length muumuu or whatever it was she was wearing.
Oh yeah.
Before I move on and continue with cast, did you want to point out any other scenes? I mean, there's several really good scenes.
I do like, obviously his kind of what he called guerrilla filming of his previous films, where it was kind of like, man on the streets and very improv and all that kind of stuff. That works for him in these documentary sequences he does in this. The whole newsreel sort of feel of telling the story of the twins that she goes and watches.
She goes and visits a guy that had written a story on them a while back. And
in Life magazine.
His name is Barnard Hughes, and I recognized him from a lot of stuff too. He played Arthur McLennan, and they basically watched this microfiche film version of a documentary, I guess, that he filmed or whatever about the twins before they were separated.
Yeah, and then he used that same kind of style in the way he did that real Ken Russell dream.
The dream sequence, yeah.
Which made me think, from a technical perspective, I think this movie would have worked a lot better in black and white. As a matter of fact, I would like to go back and watch it and turn the color down on my monitor, because I think it would work a lot better in black and white.
I love when he switches to black and white. I think it's gorgeous.
Yeah, but there's a crudity to it. There's, it's almost like 16 millimeter film, and when and you notice the camera guy in the dream sequence that's following the other side of them has a 16 millimeter camera. So I was wondering if he shot those really on 16,
maybe
to give it that kind of newsreely, grainy, kind of feel to it. But everything else in this is so horribly overlit. I mean, even look at those pictures behind you. There's no mood to those at all. It's just like television soap opera lighting.
I wanted to give you a good shot of Emil overacting.
Oh, creepy, dude. He's just bug-eyed, weird, little bitty cheesy mustache. He's just creepy.
He's awesome.
He's awesome. What did he go do after this?
Speaking of cast, awesome. That would have been another one of the scenes would be the dream sequence itself. I love how it's done, even though they go back to the really melodramatic music when it gets time for the meat cleaver.
Correct.
All of that stuff is great to me. Even the end is so bizarre.
Now, by end, which scene are you talking about? Because I think there's three. There's the wake me up because there's a dead guy and his crazy girlfriend on top of me. There's here's our curtain call with the ambulance. And then there's the very last scene. And then there's the very, 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 very last scene, which I thought was totally unnecessary, but it was in
there. Wait, did I miss that one?
The one with the couch.
Okay, that's the very last scene, right?
Yeah. So very last.
Then what were you referring to before the very, very, very last scene?
Her in bed with her mother and the detective, and she's going, there was no body because there was no murder.
Because there was no body. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I love, you're right. There are like 4 endings, but which is kind of funny because the very ending doesn't end. It's basically Charles Durning up on a telephone pole with binoculars looking at the couch at what looks like a Canadian train station. Yes,
very true. And I have that in my notes. It looks like a train station. There's a cow there, which is very Lynchian kind of feel to it. And he is like maybe 20 yards away, but with binoculars, because God knows you got to watch that couch close.
And I mean, he's a great private detective because I guess he thinks he's a lineman because he's at the top of a telephone pole,
right,
in one of those belts attached to it.
Sure that nobody will see him up there. He'll be fine.
Nobody at all. But the whole thing is like, okay, so he followed this couch with the dead body in it all the way to Canada. And you basically see the couch there with a cow standing next to it. The end, question mark.
Right, but no question mark. I mean,
there is the question marks up here in my head.
Yeah. I don't know why De Palma did that, other than is that a little Hitchcockian sort of, it's an open-ended story, like Psycho with him smiling, I wouldn't hurt a fly, kind of thing.
Right.
It was just weird.
It is weird, but it's deliciously weird. I love it.
Well, and to your point, it didn't feel like upstate New York. It felt like Canada. And I was going, so he went all the way to Canada, and he's just going to monitor this sofa.
Right. I mean, he is a private detective. He told us that at least 10 times.
Yes, very. He went to school for it.
He went to school at so-and-so school.
So-and-so's private detective school.
Academy. In the Bronx or wherever. Yeah. Yes. Oh, funny stuff. All right. Well, if we're going to move on from scenes, let's talk a little bit about Margo Kidder playing Danielle and Dominique.
Okay.
We know her, as I mentioned, as Lois Lane from Superman, and also Black Christmas. Can't forget that. She's also in Amityville Horror, which is another one right up my alley. But do you know who Ray Stark, the producer, originally wanted for this role?
No.
Raquel Welch. I just see her running around in Fantastic Voyage. Or is it Fantastic Voyage she's in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or 1 million years BC. Come on.
Yeah,
now.
I was going to say she's the pretty one running around. She doesn't do a lot of in-depth acting.
No. I don't think she would have been able to do the French accent, for one thing. I think that would have been weird.
And Margo Kidder is French Canadian, so she had it already. Yeah.
Right, which worked. I would. I mean, not that I wouldn't have mind seeing Raquel Welch anytime, but I just don't know. I don't know. I don't think that would have been good casting.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, that's all I have as far as alternates on her. But I did mention earlier that her and Jennifer Salt were roommates in Southern California in the 1970s. They used to hold parties for their friends and neighbors that included Paul Schrader, who we've talked about on this podcast, I believe, during the Cat People, Blythe Danner, Bruce Paltrow, and Brian De Palma. One year, Kidder and Salt opened Christmas presents under their tree, and each one contained a script for this film. So Brian De Palma gave it to them as a Christmas present.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was kind of cool.
That's cool.
But it does say click all over it. There is a click going on here with these guys. So,
there's definitely, they're definitely borrowing from each other all the time, kind of thing. Yeah.
I mentioned that Jennifer Salt moved on to be a powerhouse producer of a lot of things with Ryan Murphy, beginning with Nip Tuck. She went on to American Horror Story and the recent Ratched series that has Sarah Paulson in it.
Yeah.
But she also adapted a rather big screenplay. Would you like to take a guess at what that screenplay was that she did?
What would it be?
Eat, Pray, Love. The one that Julia What's-Her-Face is in.
Yeah.
I can't remember her last name. Why
Roberts?
am I going Julia Roberts? I'm going blank. And that was a big movie, and that was a big book. So,
a huge book. Yes.
Jennifer also says that playing Grace Collier was her favorite role of all. I think it was about her only role.
Probably out of the three I did, that was it.
Yeah. Let's see. Charles Durning and William Finley, who I believe is the guy you don't like.
Emil,
yeah. William Finley. They went on to both be in The Fury as well, which is another Brian De Palma movie, the one that we discussed when we were doing Carrie.
I like the movie. I'm trying to remember where Charles Durning was in it.
Probably a smaller role.
Yeah, probably.
Okay. Him and William Finley both. William Finley was in another horror movie that I watched from the 80s. I seem to remember fondly, called The Fun House. I would have to watch it again. I don't really remember it, but it seems like I remember. You know what? I do remember that. That was based on a Dean Koontz story. That was actually a pretty good movie, if I remember.
Yeah, I
right.
think so. I think you're right.
With
I
like
vaguely
a
remember that.
deformed monster type thing that was actually
That hides
living in a fun house.
Yeah, he hides in the fun house. He lives there and travels with the carnival.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Lyle Wilson, who played Philip, the African-American lead that gets killed, in the beginning of the movie. I don't know if you remember me mentioning this on a podcast a while back, but he is in The Incredible Melting Man, which is a horrible, horrible movie. But as soon as I saw him, I went, oh my God, that's the guy that gets stabbed in the crotch in Sisters. And it, of course, was. There was no one around to see or hear me say that because Dennis won't watch these kind of movies with me.
Of course not. No.
But when De Palma had originally envisioned this, he, was thinking bigger, like he was a bigger director. Who do you think he wanted for the parts of Philip? I mean, not Philip. Yeah, Philip and Danielle.
Oh, I don't know.
He wanted Sidney Poitier.
Good luck with that. Okay.
And Marlo Thomas. It's like the opposite of each extreme. It's like really, really good television.
Wow. Okay. That would have definitely been a good luck getting that happen.
Oh, you know what? I am wrong. I'm sorry. He wanted her for Grace, not for Danielle. But still, it still wouldn't work. I don't think. No, I would take Jennifer over Marlo for that. I think.
Yeah, I would too. Yep.
Okay, we mentioned Barnard Hughes, Mary Davenport.
Do you know where I remember him from? He has the final line in Lost Boys. That's Grandpa in Lost Boys.
You're right. And I knew he looked familiar.
And he's the one that comes out and goes, that's what I don't like about Santa Clara, all the damn vampires.
Whenever I see him, he reminds me of, is it Mr. Hooper that was on Sesame Street?
No, I don't think it was Mr. Hooper.
I don't know. Anyway, he reminds me of like one of those characters from children's television.
Well, he was in television. He's done a bunch of television.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know he was in Blossom. He was in a couple of other shows, always playing that, the grandfather or the elder character sort of thing. So, yeah, I like him. I love that voice he has, that kind of, I've got that little, I can help you sort of voice, and it's great.
Yeah, I mean, and he is that way. He basically says, "Oh, are you doing a story? Well, come on in, let's talk." I'm like,
"Yeah,
oh, not me. That nice people like that in New York."
Right, right.
Nah, I'm being unfairly stereotypical, but anyway, Barnard Hughes. We mentioned Mary Davenport played her real mother. Played her mother and is her real mother. Jennifer Salt's real mom. Played Grace's mother in the movie. Her name is Mary Davenport. Well, the one that thinks she should settle down and get married.
Okay, then.
And then we've already mentioned Dolph Sweet being very similar to Charles Durning and Olympia Dukakis having a cameo. And I don't even know if it's a cameo. I mean, I don't think she had done anything major before this, had she? When did Olympia Dukakis come along?
This had to be near the beginning.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't remember her until Moonstruck, which would have been what, 8 years later.
Yeah, and that's when you really remembered her. Yeah, definitely.
Actually, no, that was probably late 80s. So yeah, it was over 10 years later.
Yeah.
And then she went on, of course, to do Steel Magnolias and the like. This movie won no awards. However, our friends over at the Saturn Awards did nominate it for Best Horror Film of 1975.
1975? I thought it was 73.
It came out in 73. Oh, you know what? You're right. This movie came out in 72. So maybe they have the year wrong.
They must. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting, because I have it as 73 and I have it with the I don't know why I have it in 73. That's weird.
I have it in 1972.
Okay.
But for some reason, I keep wanting to say 74. It's 72, and it's 4 years prior to Carrie, which was 76.
Okay.
So anyway, no awards. And it was not on the 1001 list. I didn't think it would be. It's on my 1001 list.
It should be the 1001 of Brian De Palma movies. Yes.
Yeah. I have a little bit of trivia before we get to keys. Did you have anything else you want to cover?
No, go for it.
Okay. Brian De Palma, and he even mentions this in the documentary, got a lot of flack from people saying you can't hide a body in a sofa bed. And he said, that's not true. We did it. I mean, not a real dead body, but a real person. They practiced it. Now, if you sit on it, it may feel weird, I would think, but you can get a person in a sofa bed. So kudos to Brian De Palma for standing his ground on that.
Yeah, I mean, this was obviously a movie that was extremely low budget. I don't recall the budget for it. But I mean, this came out, if this did come out in 72 is when The Godfather came out.
Right.
I mean, and like what else? There was another, Deliverance, Cabaret. 72 had huge, big movies. And then this came out the same year. It's like, okay, right. Not the same budget, guaranteed.
No, I would say who did that? Coppola. Coppola did The Godfather.
Yes.
I would think Coppola and Scorsese were probably on the scene in the early 70s, whereas De Palma and Paul Schrader came in the later 70s. So they really rose to power kind of things. Right.
Yes,
I think they were in the school of big directors. They were probably about 5 years behind Coppola.
Definitely. Well, because I know 73 is Mean Streets. That's Scorsese's first big movie. Right. So yeah, I totally agree with that.
And then Spielberg's right in the middle because he was 75 with Jaws.
Yeah, 75 with Jaws, and then on and up until now. So
yeah, still going.
I do like, I was just trying to look at my trivia, my last little step before we do keys. The one big special effect shot in this where the camera pans over and both of them are sitting there on the bench. That's really, really good use of split screen. Mm-hmm. It works really well and looks very realistic. Mm-hmm. I thought, yeah, that one works right there. I still wish the whole movie had been in black and white, but that worked. Yeah. And that's all I think I've got from I've got butcher knives really make the best separation tools, huh? Or meat
It's
cleavers.
Not a knife, though. It's a meat cleaver.
It's a cleaver. Yeah.
Yeah. It's huge.
And I've got all the way through Tell Tim Bad Blood all the way through. I'm going to give it a key for what was the Argento one with the blood that was so bad? Blood red blood?
Deep red.
Deep red.
It's the same blood from Dawn of the Dead and Deep Red. Yeah, for sure. It's Argento Romero blood.
It's Argento Romero blood. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. I was thinking the exact same thing. It looks like paint.
Yeah. That's one of my keys is bad blood.
That reminded me of something, and I won't dwell on it, but he wanted to use not split screen, but he wanted to keep coming. Well, first of all, the spot on the couch is too high. He acknowledges that. It should have been lower, because if it's blood from the man and not just a brush up of blood, it would be lower because the body would be lower in the couch. But he had this thing that he was trying to do that he filmed, and he said he ended up scrapping it because it just did not work. But he wanted you to see that spot getting bigger as the cops are doing their thing around in the apartment. And that would have been great if he could have pulled it off. But he said, I guess budget limitations or time or whatever, he just couldn't make it happen the way he wanted it to. So, but I do like that element. That's a very Hitchcockian element too, of them, right out there in the open, and we can see it, but they can't.
Yep. Yeah.
which is really a cool thing. And if we're moving on to keys, Dario Argento was one of my keys.
One of mine too.
That whole murder scene with the knife is right out of an Argento movie. Big.
Oh my gosh! Even down to seeing the shadow as the knife goes into his mouth, kind of thing. That was so Argento.
Yes, and the splat on the wall.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
For sure. Do you want to dive into the world of keys too?
Yes, I've got.
I need to keep.
We mentioned them already, but you cannot list enough of the Hitchcock keys. So Vertigo, Psycho, even Rope. The whole thing of the body's right there, and some people are sitting on it, and people are walking around it, and nobody's knowing that it's right inside that thing right there in front of you. It's very, very Hitchcock all the way through.
We mentioned in Carrie that I mentioned that I never associated Carrie with Hitchcock until I watched it again just a few weeks ago. And I was wow, there's Hitchcock all over it. This movie, I think, has the most of any. I mean, you can't even just list them, really. You just have to say all Alfred Hitchcock movies are in this movie.
Yes, even down to like Topaz, where they're following the guy on the car, or North by Northwest, where they're having the chase. It's the same kind of thing of follow that big global van. It has a
like her behind me, Rear Window, her seeing the murder from across the street. I mean, it's all the main character dying near the beginning is Psycho.
Don't know which girl is which. Vertigo.
Right.
I mean, it definitely is an homage to Hitchcock all the way through it. The other one I have is Cronenberg, mostly because we mentioned Canada, and then the last shot is definitely Canada. And it has that kind of it's just a tap on it, but it is body horror, of the huge scar when they're having the romantic scene, and then seeing the scar at the end, and then, of course, we have to be stabbed in the crotch and the mouth sort of thing. So very Cronenberg in those respects. I thought.
Yeah.
It also has a Canadian feel to it. Don't you think? Just in the way it seems overcast in every shot. It seems it could have been shot in Toronto.
You could go a step further and say that it's almost a foreign film feel too.
Oh, that's and Argento. Yeah. Same
with
thing.
the Argento stuff. So it doesn't feel like an American movie. It really doesn't.
Agreed. Very foreign influence.
Other than New York.
Yep.
Yeah. And as far as Cronenberg, I would think, as far as the body stuff, I would think of The Brood, actually, and Samantha Eggar with her weird body stuff in that.
Yep.
Not to mention the vagina.
Well, and
the
one with the twins, the Cronenberg one where they have to separate the Siamese twins.
That's great.
Yeah.
And I have been meaning to rewatch that. That's one that I should revisit.
Is that Jeremy Irons? See the one that's in that?
It is.
Yeah. That's a good movie.
And it's I think it's on Amazon right now. So I also mentioned the dream sequence being very Ken Russell-esque, but you mentioned it being very, very David Lynch. And that is true. It is very David Lynch too.
Well, Lynch is much more voyeur than Ken Russell. Ken Russell is, you're in the trip. Let's have a good time. This is trippy and crazy. Lynch loves voyeurism. And this movie starts with voyeurism. I mean, you are literally right there, watching this guy watch this blind woman. And it's a very, shouldn't look sort of feel to it. And there's a lot, and down to, then her watching her, the lady across the street, and then him voyeuring at the end. The whole dream is very, the camera's panning as they pass this meat cleaver down everybody sort of thing. So very Lynch to me.
Yeah. And you've got the whole television show within a show at the beginning too, where you're watching a show of other people watching a show. Yeah.
I have a key for that. And it hit me as soon as it happened. It was Paul Verhoeven and Starship Troopers. That whole where I think I'm watching one thing and then suddenly, boom, no, this is a commercial for something totally else. And I'm actually watching it on a screen. That really pulled me. I was going, okay, this is just like RoboCop or Starship Troopers or any of that Verhoeven stuff, where he likes to show the advertising within the story.
So Verhoeven in general.
Yeah, he likes that. Interrupt something with a commercial or a TV show. So interrupt
or show a bunch of people naked in a shower.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with that. Now say it as though we're a bad thing. I have just a random thought as a key. This is almost like the stepfather of It Follows. The feeling being, you have sex, you're going to be stalked, or you're going to die, or something bad's going to happen. It's that kind of feel of, she's essentially cursed because she can't be aroused, because then Dominique comes out. Nobody else can obviously be attracted to her because she'll stab you in the crotch or whatever. So it's a very.
Speaking of which,
and that kind of sets up that whole Halloween 80s thing of, if you have sex, you die, sort of thing. But this was all before all that.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it's a slasher movie, but it happens to have a female killer.
Yeah. And before slasher movies were, a pair of everything.
Well, and she's not stalking people to kill them. She just happens to kill them if they wander into her world.
Yeah. She's a shark. Yeah. She just. You got close to me and you had blood, so I had to get you.
We've talked a lot about the dream sequence, and what we felt it represented as far as being sort of Lynchian, sort of Ken Russell-y. But do you want to know what his inspiration was? And Brian De Palma actually said this.
Sure.
Rosemary's Baby.
Oh,
the dream sequence in that.
I could see that. Although he shot it very different. Yes, I could see that as a key. Definitely.
Yeah, less blurry.
And it's a Monsignor, so in a weird twisty kind of way, this is almost a key for the next year, which is The Exorcist 73, right? So this is like that sort of thing, the weird priest in black and white walking around. So
we also mentioned all these Hitchcockian influences, but another one to Psycho that Brian mentions is her walk up the steps at the mental institution. Was very reminiscent of Martin Balsam's staircase climb in Psycho.
Yep, I could definitely see that. And the Psycho, of course, with the music for the following chase music and all of that is very Psycho.
There's also a blatant key that we've mentioned over a few times that we haven't even said. Do you know where I'm going with this?
No.
And a Camera was a television show in the 70s that was kind of a Peeping Tom type show. And that's what this show is kind of modeled after, the one that starts this movie off.
Oh, God, yeah. It's called Peeping Tom, for that.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was a direct ripoff of Mr. Funt.
Yes. And I wanted to make sure you added Get Out, because Get Out was it had that kind of feel to it too. Yeah.
You know what? I thought I had put that down, but I did not. Thank you. What else do I have?
That's all of mine. Just Hitchcock.
De Palma's good friends with director John Milius, which is why the head of the clinic is Dr. Milius.
Interesting. That's a cool one. That's good little trivia.
I mean, it's just kind of a little throwaway, but anyway. And then
De Palma is he's the stepchild over here of all of that clique, that Coppola, Lucas, Spielberg, Scorsese. I mean, all of them were of the same ilk kind of thing. They were the auteurs that were coming up in Hollywood, and De Palma was like way over here on the side, but he commented on everything. I mean, like I think I've said when we covered it, De Palma was the one. It was either, I can't remember, it's either De Palma or Milius, but I'm pretty sure it was De Palma, but I may be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong out there listening land if I'm wrong. But De Palma was the one that told, when they watched the first very, very rough draft, director's cut of Star Wars, De Palma was the one that told Lucas, it needs something at the beginning, like a screen crawl or a story or
No, I think you're right. I think it was De Palma. I remember us talking about this. Maybe during Empire.
when we covered Empire, I think. And that's why it has the crawl, is because they would all get together and screen each other's movies. They all screened Jaws before anybody saw it and made comments on it. And that helped Spielberg do it.
Which it's funny because I always associate some of these directors with New York, yet it keeps talking about them being in Southern California.
Well, because that's where they all went to film school. Almost all of them went to USC was the thing. But Scorsese loved New York and would always embrace New York no matter what. So would Coppola, even though he's from California.
Well, and apparently De Palma, because this movie's filmed in New York too.
Or at least set in New York. Did it film in New York, really?
It filmed in Staten Island.
Okay.
For real.
All right then.
Yeah.
He probably got a lot of cheap labor in Staten Island.
Well, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, probably.
I mean, that's the Staten Island ferry they're on.
Yeah, makes sense.
You know, multiple times whenever they're leaving the city to go over to Staten Island or back and forth.
Yep.
The only other thing I have is yet another I caught from IMDb that just basically lists a slew of Hitchcock movies.
It makes sense. Yep.
It says several scenes, including Vertigo, Rear Window, Psycho. The score is Bernard Herrmann, who worked with him on Vertigo, Psycho, and The Birds, and Marnie. So you've got the key, not only of the technique, but the key of the music as well.
Yep. Makes sense.
Anyway, I think we have run a little long. I have gone through all of my notes. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
That was all of my notes, except, just be careful if you're ever dancing in the African room. Be careful who you take home or who you go home with, because
or if you get a cake decorated from an inexperienced baker that looks kind of like Olympia Dukakis.
Never serve a cake with a knife that's bigger than the cake.
And point it to someone that's sleeping in a bed that's going to grab it and stab you in the crotch.
Even if they were totally sane, what if you scared them, waking them up, and they just grab the knife and start slashing? You don't know.
When you're cleaning up a murder scene, don't run, walk.
Don't run. Don't ever run.
You might hit a slick spot and fall.
Yes.
Don't run with cakes.
Don't run with cakes. No, never.
And if you're going to be devoted, then by all means follow A Couch to Canada.
Always. And stand on a pole until somebody comes and rescues the cow. Then you will know.
Well, I love this movie. I would recommend this movie. There are a lot of movies that came out in 1972 that you could put up against this that wouldn't hold a candle to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So highly recommended from me.
Well, highly recommended from Tim and quasi recommended from me. Yes, go enjoy it because it is worth it. Margo Kidder is great in it, and tragic what happened to her.
Well, and Brian De Palma is a master director, and this is just him in the beginning stages. So it's fun to watch for that alone.
And thank you to all of you guys out there watching us on YouTube or listening to us on platform of choice. We do this once a week. We'll be probably in Science Fiction World next week. But we just want to say thank you guys. If you could do us a favor and just write a little brief review or ring the bell or subscribe, give us a rating, that sort of thing. It always helps us. And we deeply appreciate it. Tim, I guess I'll catch you next week and we'll go somewhere.
Sounds like a
weird.
plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See you, man.
Bye.
You can't start the car. Johnny has the keys.